you read a lot of articles in papers by people complaining about cancel culture, and you think, in what world are you cancelled? I'm reading your article in a newspaper, or you're doing interviews about how terrible it is to be cancelled, or, so I think the word is the wrong word. I think the word should be accountability. I think, John Cleese has been very public recently about complaining about what you got to say, and I just think it must be very hard to be a man of a certain age who's been able to say whatever he liked for years, and now suddenly there's some accountability.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Cheltenham. Very nice to be back here again and to have escaped the Waterstones tent for a couple of hours, where I'll be all day tomorrow if you want to come and poke fun at me. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Times and the Sunday Times Cheltenham Literature Festival 2022. We'd like to thank my pension expert for their support for this event. It's really packed, so that's really great news. I'm sure Graham will be delighted when I eventually allow him out of his box over there on the left. I'm Mariella Frostrup. You might know my Times Radio afternoon show, which broadcasts every Monday to Thursday from 1 to 3. That's the reason I'm holed up in Waterstones for the next 2 days, not just because I like reading. And tonight I'm absolutely delighted to have been asked to talk to the one and only Graham Norton, a man of many talents. He's captured the UK's hearts with his charisma, his humour, his warmth, interviewing the most glitzy and glamorous guests in show business from that red sofa. I'm wearing this in homage. In a hugely French accent, very good, I thought. In a hugely popular chat show, which has been running for over 30 years. That's not to forget his Virgin radio show, books, podcast, and his own extremely successful writing career. Graham Norton burst onto the writing scene with his debut novel, Holding, in 2016, which was recently adapted into an ITV drama. His latest novel, Forever Home, focuses on Carol, a recently divorced teacher living in a small town in Ireland, his preferred setting. With her only son now grown, she finds a renewed sense of belonging in a new relationship, yet her love affair sparks much chatter in her local town. And what happened to his wife, who abandoned him all those years ago? Well, I'm not going to be able to answer that question, so we know who will. But before we speak to Graham, just a reminder that we are very much after your questions. A huge part of this evening, at least 15 or 20 minutes of it at least, is to be filled with the questions that you have for Graham, so that I can sit back and relax. And we've both made a plea not to use the kind of very technological, have a pad with questions on it system. And instead we've got roving microphones because we want to be able to see you. And I know that's very unfashionable now with social media and everything, but we thought we'd give it a go the old analog way. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce you to Graham. I love that we did the showbiz kiss, even though we've just been sitting in there shooting the breeze.
No, I think it's important to say to the audience that we don't hate each other. It's optics.
It's true, but obviously being showbiz, you would have kissed me anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have been put on separate sofas, which is we're like fighting dogs.
We thought we'd holler at each other for the next 40 minutes and then let you holler at us. That seemed
ideal.
Perfectly democratic, unusually in these times. Yes, it's time, Graham.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
They found me.
Put the wine down. Yeah, he was supposed to be home by now. Anyway, look, we're really delighted to be here and extremely delighted to have Graham Norton here because ever since Holding, I've been a huge fan of your novel writing. And I thought if we start by talking... I mean, you've all been given a copy, I understand it, as you came in. And Graham and I thought that perhaps... I mean, you've had, 4 or 5 minutes before we came on. Hopefully you've made some progress.
Yeah.
So we won't be talking about a book you haven't read.
That's how long I spend on books before I do an interview. So
that long?
I know, really. If they walk slowly towards the studio. Yeah.
But you have described this book as both your funniest and your darkest. And that is, if you don't mind me saying, your trademark. You managed to make them superficially funny, but a deep vein of extreme darkness runs underneath. And I wondered if that is an indication of what the real Graham Norton's like.
Well, I think it's what we're all like, really. You know, we are all light and shade. I mean, I think my TV persona and my radio persona is all light, more or less, with a bit of snark. But
we'll have none of that snark tonight.
But in the books, you know, I think you are looking for something. I'm looking for something else. And I think my books tend to begin in a dark place. Normally, the germ of the idea is something quite traumatic. And then you want to lighten it a bit. But what I didn't expect in this book is bits of it turn into almost farce. It's kind of properly comedy. And so it strikes me that the vibe of this book is, I don't know if anyone here has spread ashes of a person.
Of my dog.
Oh, well, there you go. And it's that thing where it's the saddest thing in the world. You're crying because you're saying goodbye to someone or something you loved. But it's also hilarious because you end up eating them and they're in your hair and you suddenly realize, oh, they're in my drink. It's a funny day as well as a sad day. And so this book has a spreading ashes vibe. It's quite sad, but it's also funny.
That's not on the jacket, is it?
No,
but I'm sure
no, they didn't go with that.
It's only a matter of time, I should think. The book opens, for those of you who got to page 3 before the lights went down, it opens with this wonderful, almost, quite cinematic opening where we peer into the houses of a number of people, residents, I'm trying to remember the name of the town, Ballytor, on this Ballytor street before we zoom in on Carol, who is the heroine, your main character at number 7. There's something almost creepy about it, like a bit of a peeping Tom. Are you quite nosy?
Well, aren't we all? I mean, I love this time of the year. I love this time of the year when the evenings are drawing in, but people turn the lights on before they've pulled their curtains. I love being out with the dog about 6:30 and you're going, ooh. So yes, that is me. But I think that's all of us when we're out and about. And I think there's something interesting in Ireland where, what's in that street in that town isn't that typical. Because actually, I think it's different in England. I think people live in British villages. There's a village green and there are houses around it. In Ireland, it seems to me, the village is the shop, the post office, a couple of pubs, maybe a garage. But most people live outside the village. Most people, because land is so important, everyone wants their little plot.
We've seen the field.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there's a kind of an isolation around Irish villages, I think, where people think they know everyone else's business. But actually, it's a very good place for secrets and often quite dark secrets. And so that's why I think the books, all the books so far, have been set in West Cork, because it's just a good place for that kind of a yarn.
And in terms of the characters, because as I say, you introduce us to a number of them before we get to Carol. Are you a bit of a magpie? Do you kind of look around and take little elements of people and, will I find the way I expressed a particular word or some anecdote I told you earlier stupidly in a book? I'm really embarrassed. In a book in the future, or do you not? I mean, is this entirely fiction?
I mean, I think it is entirely fiction. There's a great Scottish crime writer, Denise Mina. If you haven't read her, do. She's absolutely brilliant. And I was interviewing her, and she'd done a kind of a novel based on some true crime events. And I was just worried about, that actually people alive were still, going to be reading this. And I asked her, aren't you worried? And she just said, no, I think a writer has a bit of flint in their heart that means the book trumps all those things. And I don't have that. I couldn't, some of my friends have great stories and awful things have happened to them. Hurrah. But and I can enjoy that. But I wouldn't put it in a book. Now, having said that, I haven't let my mother read this one yet. Because, there's one of my favourite characters in the book is Carol's mother, Moira. And Moira is not my mother. But they do share some traits. Like, Moira has a thing of her version of silence in a car is my mother's version of silence in a car, which is, in fact, a non-stop monologue as you drive of kind of, she always is washing out, that dog will get killed, I wouldn't like to live there. And that lasts the length of the journey till you get to where you're going and then you've parked wrong. And Moira shares that with my mother. So I think when my mother reads this book, she may recognise a little bit of herself.
But how difficult is that then? Because as you say, all of your books have been set in West Cork. It's not a huge area, and the villages tend to be quite small, and you live in one of them in real life.
Yeah.
So every time you write a book, it must be a bit of a minefield in terms of people actually thinking that they're recognising themselves when they aren't necessarily.
No, and you're so right. People project all sorts of things. Like, oh, I know who that is. And you're like, good for you. Having said that, because the places are based on real places. And so when they were doing the adaptation for Holding, for ITV, they said, oh, where is the little village Duneen? And in that book, there's Duneen, and there are these three sisters, these three spinster sisters called the Ross sisters. And I said, oh, the place is sort of based on Durras. But none of the people are in the book. And they rang me after they'd visited Durras on a recce.
None of the people are in the book.
Yeah. So they rang me after they'd visited Durras. And they went, Graham, you do know there are three sisters who live there called the Ross sisters.
Seriously?
Yeah. I was like, no, I didn't. So they must think I've stolen their lives. But it's a pure coincidence, I promise.
So let's talk a bit more about the funny and in fact, let's talk about Carol first of all, because I feel like we've talked now for a few minutes and we've still not established what the book's about.
Okay.
Which is bad me. So tell me about Carol, about her relationship, her sort of late blooming or her second
I mean, it's kind of where the novel came from. The novel came from a woman I met in America, and she just said this phrase. She was packing up her house because she was moving upstate to be closer to her family. And she just had this phrase, of course, this is the second house I've packed up this year. And you know that I didn't ask any more because I didn't want to pry, but I was thinking, why would that be? Whose house would that be? And I decided it could have been a boyfriend. Because I think we all think if people are older and they're in a relationship, then that's a very stable relationship, that they've been together for decades. And in fact, that's not the reality now. There are lots of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who have boyfriends and girlfriends. And in that instance, if somebody happens to one of those partners, there isn't the security, there isn't the stability that comes with marriage or any of those things. So that's where Carol came from. What would happen, she is divorced, she's in her late 40s, she's an older boyfriend, and he becomes ill, and his children waste no time in putting him in a home and then turfing Carol out of her house. And then Moira and Dave, Carol's parents, Moira's the one I mentioned, they become sort of moral warriors and they decide to right a wrong. But in doing so, unearth a whole heap of trouble, plot thickens, drama ensues, the end.
Great, excellent. Well, we've done that then. Can I digress for a moment then? Because I'm wondering if you recently yourself got hitched.
I did get married.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Everyone can congratulations.
You don't
Congratulations. Could you have written this book if you hadn't?
Yes, in fact, I think I did write this book when I hadn't.
My point being, could you have published this book if you hadn't? Because it does. I think one of the very first things that struck me about it, and we'll go on to talk about other themes in a moment, was this idea that here's this woman, she's had a totally legitimate relationship with this man, and of course there's no protection in the law at all for people I say just, but that's the thing, it's not just, is it?
Yeah, they're
people
really together.
Who've lived together. And that does seem a sort of, a continuing injustice of our times in a way, but also if you were living with someone, just say you were, like Jono, your husband.
Yeah, the one I'm married to.
And then you're writing about the fact that it can all be whipped away overnight, just like that.
I mean, that isn't why I got married. I think I got married because... because he was going to put me in a home? Is that what you're saying?
We haven't got to that bit yet.
Yeah. No, I got married because I think... I wouldn't say I've had a string, but don't Google it, of failed relationships. But I think one of the nice things about getting older is that when you do meet someone that you have that sort of connection with, you know to treasure it. You know that this doesn't come along all the time, and don't be blasé about this. This is a big deal, and that was one of the reasons I got married. And the other thing about getting married, when you're older, is I think like the vows are simpler. I think till death do us part at my age seems more achievable. Like when you're 20, that's a big ask. Me, really, there's things in the fridge that will still be edible when I'm gone. So, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I said I'd digressed, and we will maybe go back to that in a bit. But one of the things that I found incredibly heartrendingly painful in this book, and maybe because my own mother has dementia.
I thought of it. You mentioned that, and I thought of you. Yeah.
And you very vividly evoke just how that plays out, and how difficult also it is for the people, not the person with dementia or with Alzheimer's, but actually the person going to visit and kind of, wondering. I mean, one of the nurses said to me the other day, there's lots of people who don't come and visit anymore. And I thought, well, she wasn't saying it in a judgmental way. She was actually nudging me, I think. And no, but there is a sense, you just think, I'm not visiting that. And you describe that very eloquently and very powerfully here. What was it that made you want to investigate the topic of Alzheimer's and dementia?
I mean, my father had Parkinson's, which is a different disease, but it has that similar quality of slowly robbing somebody you love. You watch it in real time as the person disappears. So there was that, and also because actually later on in Parkinson's it does become a bit like that. So my father's short-term memory did sort of go. And because of the age I am, we are, lots of us, I've known you for a long time, and you weren't at school when we met.
Now I know why you're writing about dementia, Graham.
But a lot of friends have gone through this, and it is such a cruel, horrible thing. And I didn't specifically diagnose Declan in the book because I wanted to keep it as broad as possible, because I think people's experience of it is so specific. And I did use there are moments in this book that are drawn from life that friends have told me about dealing with parents and things. But I think to be Carol and to have it be your partner, and actually I think also it came from when I used to do the column for The Telegraph. I used to do a kind of agony uncle thing for The Telegraph. We got quite a few letters from people in relationships where they had turned into a carer. And that must be so difficult that, it's someone you love. And I remember, I might cry, but I won't. I remember my dad was in hospital, and my mom and my mother told me the story, and she was visiting him, and as she was leaving the room, he turned to her and said, who'd have thought it would end up like this?
Oh, dear.
And who'd have thought? Who'd have thunk it? Because I remember when my dad died, I suddenly kind of got, oh my God, they were young and in love once. My dad owned a motorbike. They were this cool young couple, and yet that was where their journey ended. And I think that must be brutal. And so I do explore it a bit in the book, but then, because he gets put in a home, it changes, that relationship changes.
Another thing that fascinates me, and I think this is true of all your books, is that you really do explore your characters, and there are really human stories in there, as you've just evidenced in a way. But you always tie them together with a plot, and sometimes, as in this book, for example, sometimes you almost feel like, I could just ditch the plot bit and really immerse myself in these characters, because it's really quite beautiful writing. Are you ever tempted to kind of step beyond that need for sort of narrative plot. You know, there's a bit of a death, a bit of an investigation, a bit of a... Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. And the first book I wrote, because I'd never written a book before, I made it a proper crime novel. And it was kind of, it followed the pattern of a crime novel. You know, a body's discovered, halfway through a second body's discovered. At the end, the detective is in danger, and then we discover who did it, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really good thing for a first novel because it gave me a framework and a structure. But as you say, what I discovered was it was all the other stuff I liked writing. I liked the quieter moments, I liked the relationships, I liked the description, I liked all of that. But for me, I still need a plot. When I'm reading a book, it doesn't matter how well the characters are drawn, how gorgeous a turn of phrase it is. I need to know why I'm reading this. I need to know why I'm still turning the pages. So for me, plot is key. Like I'm reading Kate Atkinson at the moment. And for me, I think Kate Atkinson is so good at that, where it's got it all. It has the relationship, it's got the tiny little details, the observations, the insights, but it's got a plot. There's something is unfolding. You are going to learn what happened by the end of this book. This is the new one, I think it's called Shrines of Gaiety, or Shrine of Gaiety?
Shrine of Gaiety.
Yeah, something like that. Google it.
Don't ask me, I've forgotten.
You're sitting in Waterstones all day.
Well, you just pointed out how old I am, so how could I possibly remember? Thanks so much. We were laughing earlier because Graham was going to get a glass of wine. He said, should I? And I said, well, of course you should. You're a writer. You know, writers drink wine. We all know that.
Yeah, I'm wearing a corduroy suit and drinking. I'm a writer.
And you're a writer. You're so a writer. You seem to be two people, because the sort of writerly life would not necessarily be cognizant with the showbiz, the chat show, the anecdotal, the extrovert. So there has to be two Graham Nortons. And when did you discover the writerly one? And how different are they? And don't say they're not different at all, because they really...
No, they are different, but it's all me. I mean, I think, like, you know, I said earlier, I think you do what's required of you. You know, in the chat show on the radio, it's, you know, it is light entertainment. That's what they're for, those shows. And I don't think I could be a full-time writer. I think if I would go Billy Bonkers if I was just locked in a room trying to write books. But as a reaction to everything else I do, I love it. Because it's the only thing I do that is solitary, properly solitary. Because everything else, you know, the radio, the television, whatever else I'm doing, there's a meeting at some point. There's a group and everyone's deciding this should happen, da-da-da. And, you know, so you end up kind of maybe in an interview asking some questions you don't want to ask, or not asking a question you were interested in, because you're being produced. And with the books, I'm the producer. I'm the only one there. And so I can go to darker places, or, you know, just different parts of my personality can come out in these. And I think there's sometimes people read these books and think, oh, Graham will be in this book. And I'm not in the book, but clearly if you want to psychoanalyze me, it all fell out of my head. So
Really, you are.
Yeah, so it is all in there.
Tell me a little bit then about young Graham Norton. It was Graham Parker, actually. Walker. See, look, I told you, you can't rely on anything. I haven't even
She's hanging on by a thread.
It's a miracle I'm still upright. This could be my last ever appearance. Yeah, I want to know about, because we grew up at the same time in Southern Ireland.
But you look so young.
Don't start that again. And I was considered a freak, because I'd come from Norway and had a bit of an accent then, and you know, wasn't Irish, and I had peanut butter and jam sandwiches, and we had duvets, or duinas, as we used to call them.
Wow.
And that was like really exotic, but also to be disparaged and to be extremely suspicious of.
Yeah.
You wore dresses, given half the chance.
Yes.
And were a bedwetter, by your own admission.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that your school days must have been pretty difficult.
Now, it is weird, because when I wrote this autobiography, and I kind of skirted over this, because I didn't know what to say about it, because I do look back at myself as a little boy. And as a little boy, I did like wearing my sister's dresses. I did wet the bed. And that should have been difficult. But my parents were kind of amazing. They just kind of rolled with all the punches. And they never stopped me from, and they would protect me if there was a sleepover or something. They would talk to the mother of the other parents and kind of go, this might happen, and everyone was kind of cool with it. To the point where I remember I must have been about 20, and we were back in Waterford, whereas that's where I'd been.
They think you're still having sleepovers at that point.
Oh, right, no, not that, no. This was me and my mother. We were in Waterford, and where I lived when I was like 4 or 5. And we bumped into an old neighbour, and we were chatting. And the old neighbour said, "Oh, and do you still like dressing up?" Right? And my mother, what was going on in her head? She must have thought, oh, he's still doing acting. So she went, "Yes, he does." Neighbour's face was like, But no, I don't know how. I remember when I went to primary school, my mother said to me, she kind of sat me down, kind of the only advice she ever gave me, and she sort of sat me down and said, if people are mean to you, people will try, don't react. Don't react. That's what they want. They want a reaction. Don't react. And so I didn't. I took it, and I think it makes you probably emotionally quite distant and cold. But it did save me from being bullied in school, because I wasn't a satisfying person to bully.
But you were nevertheless quite eager to get out.
Oh yeah, I mean, because
of Ireland.
And that was growing up in Ireland in the I was 63, so the 60s, the 70s, the early 80s. I was so ready to get out of there, and also because now, I don't know, Ireland has changed so much in that time. So now I go back and I love it. But it's not just Ireland that's different. I'm different. I'm older. I've got some money in my pocket. It's a very different world. But back then, I knew the world was happening elsewhere. My window on the world was TV, movies, books. I wanted to escape. I had, and even now, people say, oh, would you leave if you were growing up in modern Ireland? And I think I would. I think I'd still have the curiosity. I think I'd still want to get out there and see what else was in the world.
But it's interesting that, you say your world then was TV and books and films and so on. And yet, when you write, which offers you the freedom to go anywhere you want in the world, explore anything in the world, you go straight back to West Cork.
Well, I didn't go straight back to West Cork. Well, I did, but
you did.
But when I got the book deal to write this novel, the nice thing about being man off the telly is you get a book deal. Don't hate me. And but the bad bit is, I don't know about for you, for me, reading, it's kind of the most intimate entertainment there is. It's just you and that book, and you open those pages and you're in that world, you're with those characters. You're not sitting in rows, you're not hearing other people laughing or reacting to something else. It's just you. And I love that, the way that two people can read a book and have so incredibly different reactions to it. And so I didn't want to be reading the book over people's shoulders. So I tried to remove myself as much as possible in terms of my public persona. So, it wasn't set in London, it wasn't set in the world of the media. In that first book, there were no gay characters, it wasn't funny. But then I still needed to write about what I knew, and it turned out the only other thing I knew anything about was Ireland in the 70s. So that's where that book ended up. And I was worried because I thought, because I haven't lived in Ireland for nearly 38 years now. Yeah, I think just about 38 years. And I thought, what if I've got this wrong? What if I don't have a clue? But Ireland have really embraced these books, and so that, in a way, that kind of is the thing that pleases me most, is that Ireland thinks I write about Ireland well.
Does it fill you with some degree of pride the way in which Ireland's changed since the 1970s. I was interviewing Bono the other day. He's going to be here on Sunday. Maybe some people here will be lucky enough to have tickets for that.
Yeah.
But and he was talking about how, you know, this was this tiny nation, and actually it was the diaspora, the people who went out, that went all to the four corners of the globe in order to kind of try and find a living and find a thing, that in the end turned Ireland cosmopolitan, you know, turned this tiny nation, a rock in the North Sea, into this incredibly cosmopolitan place, because even the people who didn't come back, they sent back their stories and their experiences. And it feels, I mean, Ireland feels now, I just was there 2 weeks ago, it feels so much more modern.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Then I would argue, than even London. And maybe that's just because it's comparative. You know, it's comparative to what we might think of Ireland as having been before.
I mean, so I don't feel pride, I feel gratitude, because I left. I mean, the people I'm grateful to and the people who should be proud, I think, are the people who stayed, and the people who went on all those marches and signed petitions in the rain on Grafton Street. You know, those are the people who should be extraordinarily proud. All those kind of Irish campaigners who, for years, you just felt, oh, you were just banging your head against a brick wall.
This is
never going to happen. But bit by bit, they changed minds and moved the discussion on. And so I sort of feel very humble that I did the lazy thing. You know, I left Ireland, I just moved where the gays were, you know. I'll do that. Whereas the ones who stayed, I mean, that was a hard gig. That was the thankless job. So I'm very, very grateful to all those people.
And yet you said with holding, not and yet really, I'm just trying to make it sort of segue, but it doesn't really, just because I said and yet doesn't mean there's any connection at all, actually. But with holding your first novel, and I think, you know, actually in all of them to some extent, you know, the characters that you zoom in on most, the characters that you're most interested in as a writer, tend to be outsiders. In the first one, as you said, you didn't want to make him gay, but you wanted to give him qualities that made him not feel a part of the crowd, made him feel apart from the crowd. And that, I think, is autobiographical.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I can write about male characters, you know, in that that's the man I grew up being. You know, I didn't feel like, you know, and it's all those silly things. I just never felt, you know, because I wasn't good at sports, I couldn't throw a stone. I still can't throw a stick. I mean, honestly, the dogs, when I throw a stick, the dogs just go, for fuck's sake, where's this gonna go?
What's the point?
You know, behind his head, where is it? And it is, and that's a kind of such a trivial example, but yes, it is about your masculinity and how you are expected to fit in, particularly back in the 70s in rural Ireland. It was one way for men to be, and I wasn't that way. So if I want to put men in these books, they either need to be gay or othered or apart or separate in some way, so that I can get inside their head.
So when do you still feel like an outsider? Because you're an insider in so many places, aren't you? You're an insider in your village in West Cork. You're an insider in the world of media that you describe. You know, you've done your talk show for 30 years.
It's not 30 years.
It is 30 years.
No, it's not 30 years.
You sure?
98 was the beginning.
I'm not good at maths.
Well, it's not 30. This is 22, Mariella.
It says 30 years. Okay, but it says
Where's Carol
30 years.
Vorderman? I asked for Carol Vorderman.
So sorry. If I'd realised that numeracy was one of the skill sets required for tonight, I wouldn't have volunteered. Okay, a really long time. And in that...
Let's go with 30 years. That sounds better than a really long time.
I'm only saying 30 years to make you feel more guilty about the fact that you've never invited me on the programme. But can we go... back to you, Graham, because I know that's where you'll be more comfortable. We're talking about where you still feel like an outsider, or do you feel like an insider everywhere, an outsider everywhere?
I don't know. I mean, what's happened to me in my life and career is odd. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I like being in Bantry, County Cork. I remember I did a talk in Bantry, County Cork to like an after-school group, and it was really cute, and these young kids were there, and this girl put her hand up and she questioned, it's like, what's it like being famous? And it's kind of a good question. What is it like being famous? And then it came to me, it's like living in Bantry. Everyone knows your business, and there are people you want to avoid in the supermarket. And I think that's why I like it there, because although my job is a bit more exotic, they know me, but I know a lot of them. That's Anne who works in the butchers, that's the guy who works in the car thing, that's the guy who came and fixed my gates. You know who they are. So you could kind of, as you say, kind of become more of an insider. You're kind of part of that community. Whereas walking down Oxford Street and having everyone know who you are, that's a much weirder experience. So I think that's why I like rural Ireland. So
Forever Home then is like a sort of allegory about fame.
Is that what it is?
It's really about your life. Yes. And the outsider, Carol is the outsider. Yeah.
Oh,
and it's an allegory about fame.
This is all going in the back of the paper. This is all going in the back of the paperback.
I was thinking about the world of celebrity. They were asked, what does it feel like to be a celebrity? And it's changed enormously in the 22-30 years that you've been interviewing incredibly famous people, not at all like me.
Wow. Okay, you need to pop that in a balloon shape and let it go.
I've got a book in me. So, how do you think, because I noticed a quote from you the other day talking about how you felt that guests had actually got better and more interesting. I would argue the opposite in some ways, insofar as, whenever I interview someone really famous, I sort of think, oh, God, here we go, and the PR is going to say you can't do that, and that, and the clock's ticking from the minute you start speaking, and, and Zoom's only made it worse, and, all of those things. Yeah. And that there is a sort of degree of control, particularly with film stars, I think it's fair to say. I mean, musicians come with the biggest entourage. I've never seen an entourage as big as a musician.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of them maybe have a job.
What, the people in the entourage?
Yeah, with music people. They might have... I mean, sometimes... I remember, she will remain nameless, but I remember, like, one pop star came and she had her own sushi chef. And you kind of think...
It's not that long a show, is it? That you need a meal in the middle.
Exactly, and you kind of think, like, you do know you're paying for that sushi chef. Like, I think there's a lot of the young'uns think that somehow the record label is providing all of this stuff. No, you're paying for it. And I remember, like, she'd had, like, half a bit of raw fish and then was doing jumping jacks to burn off the calories. And,
come on, who was it?
No, I will never tell.
Yeah, I just had that point there, and on you go. But seriously, and without necessarily having to mention names, do you think that... I mean, is it still interesting? Do you still find it interesting? To do a show like yours, it's a format to an extent.
Yeah.
You do want to get the best out of people because that makes the best sort of show. But is it still possible to get the best out of people when they're self-revealing day in, day out, and so everyone's bored of reading about them? Or they're absolutely zipped up and you've got a PR with a kind of, stun gun standing behind the curtain?
I think there's a difference. I think when you talk to people, you're interviewing them. You are doing an interview. And I'm not an interviewer. I'm a host. And I think there's a big difference between being a chat show host and being an interviewer. I'm not there to uncover anything or interrogate or find out about them. No, but you know what I mean? I'm just there to allow them to be funny, to tell a amusing anecdote about something.
It's the same difference. I think it's
entertainment.
It depends. If you're interviewing the Prime Minister, and you're trying to get a sensible word out of them, which is hard at the best of times, and particularly at the moment. But, that's a different thing. That probably is interviewing. I mean, you're poking to get something out. What you and I are doing, I'm facilitating you tonight. Have you not noticed?
Well, no,
this is hosting.
But this is different, I think, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I...
Yeah, but then, I think it's still that this level of interview hasn't changed, I would say. No?
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering whether to take it personally or
This
not.
level, at this level. No, I mean that for myself. When I do the chat show, I don't want to upset anyone. So it's like, if you invite someone into your home and they say they're vegetarian and you serve them meat, that's rude. And I think it's the same thing on a chat show. I have invited them there. They haven't kind of elbowed their way in and go, right. I've said, please come on my show, you'll have a nice time. So I want them to have a nice time. The other thing is, I have very little interest. So often you'll get a PR kind of going, they don't want to talk about this. And I'm going, nor do I. It's no skin off my nose. Okay, don't talk about it.
Sometimes it's even worse than that, because sometimes I go, did they really?
Oh, no, that is the funny thing. Where they go, they don't want to talk about a relationship, but, oh, they're dating someone, I didn't know.
So it still gives you satisfaction and pleasure, and
yes.
And you don't think that there's been any sort of diminishing in quality of. I mean, recently wasn't there released a sort of I think it was a podcast of all of the David Frost interviews, with Muhammad Ali and Michael Caine and all those famous sort of interviews, and everyone went, oh, it's not like it used to be, And
it's not, I suppose, but. What are you going to do? I think we still put together on a Friday night, on a good week, we put together a very entertaining show. And it's fun. And it's not like a David Frost interview, in that I think one of the big differences is they're on the couch together. And so they feel like they're amongst their peers and they're trying to entertain and amuse people either they know or feel like they know or would like to know. And I think that's the dynamic. I think on our show, we can have Robert De Niro on because, Robert De Niro, lovely man, but, he cannot tell an anecdote. No. And I remember, do Google this or YouTube it or whatever, David Letterman wanted Robert De Niro. For years, he wanted the great Robert De Niro on. Wanted him on. Finally, he got him, and David was so excited. When you watch it, to say that Robert De Niro was monosyllabic is to suggest he spoke at all. There was a raised eyebrow, a smirk, a grunt occasionally, and I think it was on for about 12 minutes. It's just agony, and particularly because it was David Letterman's dream guest. He'd always wanted this guy. So when he does our show, he's just a benign presence, and he will agree with you that he was in a film.
Helpful.
Unless he wasn't. And that's as far as it goes. And I think, if you were doing a David Frost interview with Robert De Niro, then that's, hell. That's a kind of scorched earth. But it works on our show because he's there and nodding and smiling at something else. So he's kind of revealed in his reactions to other things rather than in what he says.
Silence speaks volumes.
There you go.
Well, neither of us would know.
No, we'll never know that.
No. And so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions,
okay.
And then I'm going to open it out to you, who I know have got far better and more piercing questions than I've managed to rustle up tonight. But then I'm just a host, not an interviewer.
No, you're an interviewer. You're an interviewer.
I'm a host. It sounds much easier. Much less work, definitely. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was, it's almost impossible to find anyone say a bad word about you at all. Even like reading book reviews, they're all good. But people did get a bit upset about J.K. Rowling and you having her on Virgin, I think. Now, do you think about cancel culture in any great shape or form? Because the other thing I was struck about when I was in Ireland very recently was just that it almost doesn't exist there because Irish people just talk, and they can talk about anything and nothing. And that's not to say that, terrible things haven't happened in Ireland as we know, whether with the church or, in terms of the Troubles and so on. But there is a sense that nothing is off limits so long as you go about it in the right way. Maybe that's the thing. And
maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's interesting is you read a lot of articles in papers by people complaining about cancel culture, and you think, in what world are you cancelled? I'm reading your article in a newspaper, or you're doing interviews about how terrible it is to be cancelled, or, you know, so I think the word is the wrong word. I think the word should be accountability. You know, I think, you know, John Cleese has been very public recently about complaining about what you got to say, and I just think it must be very hard to be a man of a certain age who's been able to say whatever he liked for years, and now suddenly there's some accountability. There, you know, it's free speech, but not consequence free. And so, you know, I'm aware of saying, aren't you aware when you do so, like, I'm aware of the things I say.
I'm usually after the event think, you know, but that's just me. But what about then? I mean, that's a very easy target, isn't it? A sort of, you know, middle-aged man who's used to saying what he wants, rule the world, mansplains everywhere he goes, etc., etc. But for example, J.K. Rowling, then, I mean, that's harder to make a point with, isn't it? When you look at someone expressing what may or may not be popular opinions, but to be deluged with the kind of anger, rage, and attempts at censorship, it seems to me something more than just a middle-aged man kind of not being able to say something he used to say in the days of empire.
Yeah, I mean, what I feel weird about this is when I'm asked about it, then I become part of this discussion.
I know, that's what I'm wondering.
And all I'm painfully aware of is that my voice adds nothing to that discussion. And I'm sort of embarrassed that I'm somehow drawn into it. You know, and if people want to shine a light on those issues, then, and I hope people do, then talk to trans people, talk to the parents of trans kids, talk to doctors, talk to psychiatrists, talk to someone who can illuminate this in some way. You know, I'm very aware that as bloke off the telly, you know, your voice can be artificially amplified. And once in a blue moon, that can be good. But most of the time, it's just a distraction. And it's just, you know, it's for clicks, it's for whatever, you know, that you can put my name in a headline, you know, Graham Norton slams, Graham Norton defends, Graham Norton weighs in on. And actually, Graham Norton shouldn't be in your headline. If you want to talk about something, talk about the thing. It doesn't, you know, you don't need to attach a Kardashian or a whatever to a serious subject. The subject should be enough in itself. You know, it's the Michael Gove thing about, you know, enough of experts. No, please, can we have some experts? Can we rustle up some fucking experts and talk to them rather than man in shiny pink suit?
But I think you would also argue that that discussion is good. I mean, it's what you've mostly spent the whole of your career doing.
No, I sit beside people laughing at them. That's my job. My job, sit beside people, laughing at them, and telling them every film I've seen is marvelous, every song I've ever heard is great, every book I've ever read is brilliant.
People think you've got no taste.
No. My opinion is worthless. Worthless.
One last question about the Eurovision.
Woohoo!
Cheltenham,
sadly overlooked. I'm so sorry. I mean, this venue alone. Lovely.
Well, are you excited about Liverpool, number one? But number two, do you have a favourite? Because I actually thought, I mean, what makes a great Eurovision? I actually thought that last year with the Kalash Orchestra, I thought that was my favourite Eurovision since ABBA.
Wow.
And ABBA, well, that's probably, I haven't watched that many of them, in fairness. Okay, but ABBA were amazing when they did Waterloo.
We've established that. ABBA, very good.
And the Kalash Orchestra, it felt like everything that Eurovision can be at its absolute best, which was a sort of community platform for the whole of Europe.
Yeah, it was lovely.
In a way that we don't often get to do anymore.
Exactly, and I think it's, you know, Eurovision is clearly a very, you know, it's a silly thing. It's a song competition, and it's full of camp nonsense, and and I love it. But this year, when the jury vote put Ukraine somewhere in the thing, and it was probably, I don't know, maybe that was where they should be. And then when the popular vote was coming in, you suddenly, a chill went through you, because you kind of thought, because I was very aware that the man doing my job was sitting in Kiev in a bunker, doing the commentary on Eurovision. And you just were very aware of Ukrainian people watching Eurovision. And you just began to dread, and you got to think, oh my God, what if the Eurovision viewers are bored of this war? What if they're not interested? What if they're not going to support Ukraine? How awful will that be to kind of, Ukraine too? And so when that huge wave, that tsunami of votes came in for Ukraine, it was just lovely. It was political with a small p, because it was just the people of Europe going, we do feel for you. We do know what you're going through. We do support you. We do want you to live in peace. It was, like I say, it just, every now and again, Eurovision does something that just kind of breaks my heart. I just loved that moment. It was kind of profound.
Graham Norton, but you don't clap yet, because you've got to ask him questions now. Or you can clap a bit.
No.
You can clap more later. Save the clapping. I don't know how we start this, really, because basically we can't see a thing.
Oh, here we go. Lights are up. Lights are up.
But I think if you want to ask Graham a question, and why would you not want to ask Graham a question? He gives very good answers, as you've hopefully noticed. Then just put your hand up, and there are people with microphones roving around, and so anyone who wants to ask a question, stick your hand up.
Oh, there's one over there already.
Can you see? I can't see that.
To the right.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and help direct. I can't see who's got the... Yes, and there's two people in that row right at the far end as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Because we've only got the two microphones, so this could take some time. Okay, brilliant. Go ahead.
Oh. Is it me? Thank you very much. I just wondered, Graham, who's been your greatest inspiration?
Who's
Careful.
talking? Oh, over there. Okay.
It's your mother.
No, because I was looking at that person, and I was thinking, who the hell is that? This lady over here. Inspiration. I mean, like, I don't think no one will be pleased to be named. I inspired that. I suppose as a chat show host, which, that is my main gig, and I'm very aware that that's the gig that gifts everything else to me. Without that, I wouldn't be writing these books. I wouldn't have the radio show. It's all from that. And growing up in Ireland, there was the Late Late Show, and it was hosted by this guy called Gay Byrne, and he really, for me, he's still hands down the best. He's sadly no longer with us, but RTE, there's an RTE player, the iPlayer for RTE. Got it? And on there's some old Late Late shows you can watch. And what's amazing is, you cut to the audience, and it's people sat there, in suits, and the women wearing hats, and it's so old-fashioned. He, absolutely modern. I mean, he is just... there's nothing formal about him. He can work the camera, he can work the audience, he could talk to anyone. I suppose Gay Byrne would be my answer to that question.
It was also quite an Irish show, if you will, because you could have Robert De Niro saying nothing on there, or just a little bit, but you would also have a priest who'd rescued a baby donkey, and someone whose child had, do you ever wish that you could have that kind of diversity?
No, honestly, part of me does wish. Like, there was an amazing episode where basically there was a competition every week, and you'd have to send in, it was back in the day, you'd have to send in a postcard, right, with your phone number on it, and then he'd dig around in the thing, pull out the postcard, and he would ring the number live on air, right? And the prize was a car. And he rang this number, and the lady said, hello. She said, oh, it's Gay Byrne here. Congratulations, you've won a car. Thank you. And wait. And go, oh, you don't sound very happy about it. Well, we've had a very difficult time.
Oh, God.
And he goes, oh, what happened? And, my daughter died, right? And now, I think a lot of broadcasters at that point would have gone, well, anyway, congratulations, bye. But Gay didn't. Gay stuck with it. And here's the really horrible bit. She died in a car crash.
Oh, God.
Here's her new car. And then he still stayed with it. And there was funny enough, there was a priest on the show.
Usually was.
And a priest, he said some kind words to this lady on the phone. And then whether he knew it or whether somebody told him in his ear, but there was a poet on that night. And he had a poem about dealing with loss. And he did his poem. And it was just beautiful. And Gay Byrne just had that confidence of that he had total control over that show and knew exactly where he was going. Whereas I think most people would have just panicked that they'd stumbled into this potentially really eggy, awful, uncomfortable thing. But he navigated it and turned it into just a fabulous moment of television.
Yeah, definitely worth looking up those late shows if you haven't seen them. Yes, we've got a lady here and then somebody else at the end of that row.
Hello. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for, it's going to not to sound emotional, but like what you've done for me and my family, like in sad times, good times, you've brought my family together around the TV, and for that I could never thank you enough.
Oh, so that's such a nice thing to say. Thank you very, very
You're
much.
literally the highlight of my childhood, so thank you. Yeah,
God.
Yeah, forget about my parents, they're boring. No, but there was a study done recently by DCMS which found that nearly 50% of young people don't read in their free time anymore. So obviously I know you're passionate about literature and writing, else you wouldn't be here. So what do you think that other celebrities or people with platforms could be doing to reignite that love and encourage young people to want to read again?
I mean, it is weird because a lot of my friends don't read, and yet you're all here, and this festival is an enormous success, and books are still big in the world, and I think we go through phases. Like I went through a phase in my probably 20s when I didn't read very much, and I think when you're young, there's also those young adult novels, and there's lots of kind of books for you, and you can read those. And I think then I went through a bit in my life where I was just, I was out. I was out or hungover or drunk. And so I didn't read very much. And then in my 30s, I got back into books. So I think I wouldn't worry so much. I know a statistic like that sounds really depressing and terrible, but I don't think it's that bad. I think most of those people at least know how to read and will hopefully discover books when it's right for them, when it suits their life.
And also I think people, particularly young people, read in different ways now as well. Like I get really depressed about it, exactly to your point. But then you see that they are reading. I mean, I know it's on a phone or it's on a thing, but I mean, my son can tell me incredible information about all kinds of things and weird stories that have happened in Australia. And, he's not interested in fiction, but he's really interested in the world. And I think maybe part of it is our panic about them not still using the form that we...
And also, I think the opposite thing is true, that actually one of the biggest things that shifts books in the world now is TikTok, which is, I know nothing about it, but, because I's
get on there.
I's old. But, TikTok's for young people, and that drives book sales like nothing else. Like that woman, Colleen Hoover, who's she's got 6 books in the New York top 10 at the moment.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And all TikTok. It's all TikTok.
Have you read one?
No, I'm not on TikTok.
You don't have to be on TikTok to read it.
No. But literally, I'd never heard of her, and suddenly she's got 6 books in the top 10.
That's quite shocking.
Like, wow.
He'll be on TikTok next week. Mark my words. Not true. There is a lady at the end there. I don't want to be dogmatic at all, but I have seen this lady put her hand up about 4 times. So let's do this gentleman and then this lady here. And we might have to soon stop, sadly.
Hi, Graham.
Hello.
You say that TV and film was one of your big escapes. How important is it that a show like Heartstopper is ready available on Netflix for people that want to explore their identity?
I mean, I think that's amazing. And also what's great about kind of streaming services is that they are so international and they're so unstoppable in a way. And I think, some countries try to put blocks on things like Netflix and stuff, but actually you can't. And it's the same, I think Drag Race is a very similar show where, Drag Race is streamed. World of Wonder have a streaming platform that's available all over the world. And yeah, I think it's really important, because people talk about representation and even growing up, to see someone like Terry Wogan on television made me think, oh, an Irish person can do that. Whereas I probably would, if I'd never seen an Irish person doing it, I think you do shut down avenues. You self-edit your life. And I think things like that are great where you see representation on TV, particularly through streaming services in countries where you wouldn't normally get that content.
Thank you very much. Over there.
Hi, Graham.
Hello.
Just a really simple question.
Uh-oh.
What is your favourite moment or favourite story from the red chair?
Ooh. Now, here's the thing. People ask me that. I don't really listen to those stories.
So you'd be the last person to ask, really.
Yeah, I know some of them are funny, but the New Zealand ones I like. There's some. I don't know what New Zealand's like. Is there a shortage of public lavatories? But it is extraordinary the number of people who have to go to the toilet by the side of the road in New Zealand. Most stories from New Zealand are something to do with that.
Anything scatological from New Zealand,
yes,
basically.
Yeah, there you go.
If I can put words into your mouth. I think we've got time for one more question. If there is one that we can easily access, but I know everyone's got
there's
to
a lady.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm not a lady, oh no.
But it's
So I took it.
bringing you the microphone.
I stole that lady's moment, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you, Graham, as a gay man myself, I find you in the centre of a lot of what I love, that being Drag Race and Eurovision, the gayest things in the world. What do you enjoy most? A simple question, and why?
Well, actually, I have to say, I'm so lucky because I'm with you. I love both those things. So when I got the Eurovision gig, I just was so blessed. And Terry, he decided not to do it anymore. And then I got the call, and Terry was so nice. He called me before I went and did it, and he kind of gave me his blessing. But to be honest with you, Terry's voice is still, 12 years on, his voice is still in my head because, he turned that job into something that it wasn't. Lots of people commented on Eurovision before. No. He morphed it in, and Drag Race is the only job I've ever asked for. I actually, when I knew they were doing Drag Race UK, I emailed them and went, hello, can I? And I think I was a bit drunk. It was certainly late at night when I sent the email. And then, that thing of horror, you wake up the next day kind of, oh, God, and now they're going to have to tell me no, and it's going to be terrible.
Shameful.
But I got it.
And that, I think, is an extremely happy and positive note on which to end this evening. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you very much to Graham Norton for being such a splendid...
Thank you very much.
Guest.
I hope you enjoy the book. Are we out of here, or do you have things to do?
I don't know. No, we're out of here, but I'm just checking.
Okay.
Are you signing books, or have you done that already?
No, signed them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to see if there's any housekeeping. Housekeeping, they call it, that I have to announce, but I can't find the piece of paper, so hopefully you all know your own way out.
We're out of here. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.